Hello and welcome to Don't Bury the Lead. My name is John Zindel. This is Dom Scarcella with me, and we do a WWE post Smackdown show every Friday night. We watch Smackdown and we talk directly about the main event and work our way to the beginning of the show and things we liked. Main event tonight, we had Sami Zayn versus Butch. Dom, what did you think of the main event tonight?
Why, I think the main event was a lot more than Sami Zayn versus Butch. I mean, the title of the show is Don't Bury the Lead. John, don't bury the lead. What's the real big story here coming out of SmackDown Live tonight?
We got some action in the main event, which I love, and they pushed a storyline, kind of just pressed fast forward, and we're like, this is what we're doing. In 2 weeks, they basically went from we don't know who's going to be in the Survivor Series to we had the roster finalized. Added Kevin Owens to this group of people from Europe.
Yes.
I
Yes.
believe they're British or Irish or one of those two. But definitely,
Combination. Butch is from England. We got that today because this match was technically a World Cup first round match for a shot at Gunter's Intercontinental Championship. So we did find that out. Sheamus, I think, is Irish. Drew McIntyre is Scottish. I mean, if Rich is from Wales, then we've got all four of the British components there going on in the British Isles. But
right.
they're all brawling guys. And the big question coming into this match was not really, in a way, this overshadows the World Cup tournament because, I mean, Sami Zayn versus Butch and who moves on wasn't really that interesting. What was interesting was all the guys on the outside getting into a fight. I mean, fairly quickly in the match. I mean, guys were interfering, guys were slugging it out on the outside, getting involved in the ring. Um, the finish, as it turns out, uh, occurred with a little bit of extracurricular activity that got in there on us. Sami Zayn was going for a move in the corner there, but Jey Uso spilled into the ring to prevent Sammy from executing a move in the corner. Excuse me, on Butch, and then Butch uses that delay to turn on the offense. I mean, he winds up winning with, they call it the bitter end. It looks like a pump handle slam that goes into a pump handle pickup that goes into a side slam. Really interesting move. He gets the pinfall on it, and then there's just, then sort of the pretext is off. And we
Yeah.
get what we thought we were going to see, which was all these guys, all 8 guys brawling. But of course, Survivor Series is not 4-on-4; it's 5-on-5.
Right.
So we had a little unfinished business here that they had to clear up for us. And like you said, Kevin Owens is revealed as the 5th man for the
Uh,
team opposing the Bloodline.
we
I
kind of
mean,
thought last week that they would go in the direction where they cut Sami Zayn off and only have 4 people because he wasn't in the
mm-hmm.
ring. But then they announced, oh, he'll be there tonight and there'll be 5. And then it's like, all right, well, then there's another person.
Yep.
Um, and I know that Kevin Owens and Sami Zayn, I don't know, I guess you're relatively new, but they have a huge history.
Oh,
They came
okay.
up in the Indies together. They were both they were tag team in the Indies. So,
Really?
yeah,
That makes their stare down it towards the end tonight even more interesting then.
and
Okay, see, I didn't catch that. I just thought,
they,
they're going to be opponents in 8 days. So, but I didn't catch that there was some history there. That's good to know.
yeah, and they've feuded a bunch in WWE, and they've always talked like it's almost like to the point where they don't need to feud anymore because they've done it as much as they could. But
Huh,
that's why I think there was kind of obvious that it would be Kevin Owens. But you
really?
know,
Okay.
I
I didn't
think
know that at all. I had no idea who it would be. To me, it was almost who's going to be the fifth man, and I thought back to the NWA, who's the third man, which obviously was drawn out a little bit longer. But who's the fifth man? Who's it going to be? I mean, thankfully, we're finding out before Survivor Series and not during the main event, as the NWO reveal was. But yeah, this was interesting to me. It's also interesting because it shows, gosh, it shows each team as strong. Going into Survivor Series, you have to book a match like that where the teams seem to be on equal footing.
yeah,
Like
I think it was a good idea too. If you think about it, like, okay, Bloodline's pretty unstoppable. They have this, they have every title. They don't show any weakness at all. So you
nope,
had to throw them like a little bit of a bone. So you have Butch go over Sami Zayn, which I actually was kind of surprised because Sammy's pretty
me
hot
too,
right
me
now. I
too.
was, and Butch is somebody I haven't seen in really anything from. So I was like, oh wow, okay. Um, and then, so I think that was probably a good idea to make the Survivor Series a little bit more interesting. But I liked the way that I got to watch just the main event and a wrestling match, and it wasn't just some promo, and then this guy comes out, and because we had that last week where they were doing promos, and
Hmm.
I get it, like promos are good, but I just don't want to see that in the main event. So at least we got a match that kind of developed the storyline, and I don't have to hear any promos. So
Sure, it was a lot of physicality. I like that too. It was a neat way to go off the air because if you're introducing the fifth man, the final member of the team that's opposing the bloodline, I don't even know what we call them, but you should introduce it with some physicality.
mhm.
And I know I keep using that word. That's my word of the day, physicality. So you got to do it with some physicality. Um, you can't talk your way into a war games match. You've got to fight your way into it. And so not only does Kevin Owens get to come out and really try and really get into some moves, some interaction in the ring, getting beat up, doing some beating up himself. Um, but you see the bloodline out on the floor, all standing and kneeling, excuse me, kneeling and standing around a fallen Roman Reigns, while Drew McIntyre, Sheamus, Rich, Butch, and now Kevin Owens are standing tall in the ring, leaning over the top rope, jawing and glaring at them. So that's a good visual.
I couldn't. That's I think the first time you've ever seen Roman Reigns take a bump. I haven't seen him even get punched or hit once. I don't even think I've seen him really wrestle yet.
No, not in the time we've been seeing it. No, he wrestled that great match at Crown Jewel.
Yeah,
Fantastic match.
but
Like
that was
pay-per-view finale, main event, and it delivered. So Roman can still go, but you're right. We don't see him wrestle. And some of that is, I think, his real life health problems. I mean, he said earlier this year that, after a live show, I saw footage of this where he basically, after a house show, got on the mic and told people that, look, he's going to be a part-time wrestler from now on. And the WWE is doing, I think, an excellent job of keeping him relevant while he can't engage in physicality. There's the word again. Every single week.
oh
They're finding ways to keep him interesting and save him for pay-per-views.
he's on fire. And even just him coming out with Paul Heyman tonight, when he came out, it was like, oh,
Oh, he's
Roman
here.
Reigns is here.
Yeah.
Okay, this is the main event I was looking for because I mean, I know Sammy and Butch are both good workers, but that was like a pretty okay match. Like a so-so
This was
match.
not a one-on-one match at all from the very beginning. I mean, the one-on-one match was, and we don't like when they bury matches, but really they buried this match. This one-on-one match was simply an excuse to get all 10 guys out at ringside and fighting with each other as the show went off the air.
Right.
Like this match was just like the first domino that pushes down the rest of them. So, I mean, don't bury the lead, but sometimes you got to bury a match if there's something bigger you got to work with. And so the match, while it was a decent match, it wasn't great. It was overshadowed the whole time by the fact that it was gang on gang, not one on one.
Yeah. At least you got a match. And I was thinking too, when SmackDown started tonight, they were like, "Oh yeah, Survivor Series is next week." I was like, "Another pay-per-view?"
Yep.
So it's almost like they've done like 3 pay-per-views in 6 or 7 weeks. It feels like. So it's like,
yeah, they usually have a month apart, but because they were on that schedule of going like first weekend of the month, and then they like Thanksgiving weekend, that gives them 3 weeks between Crown Jewel and Survivor Series. I mean,
yeah.
we talked about this last week because last week was also part of the lead this week. We talked last week about what a great match the Usos versus the New Day was, and you brought up that you would have liked to have seen that go on last because it was such a great match. And wouldn't that have been fantastic if it were the main event of the show? The problem was that match was the first domino that had to fall. And they
Yeah.
couldn't put that on last because then you'd have to wait until this week for those dominoes to fall. And then we'd have to wait even longer for the dominoes tonight to fall. And they just don't have that time. So they had to have a bunch of dominoes fall last week, which they did. The bloodline is back being united. There's no longer Roman putting down the Usos, looking down on them. He treated them as equals after their big win last week, backstage and then in the ring. And then, okay, so those dominoes fall. Now, this week, we get word that Sami Zayn, who was not there last week, yes, he's here this week, and he's going to be part of War Games. Okay, so now we got yet another domino that's got to fall. 2 at least. Number one, why is Sheamus in an alliance with Drew McIntyre? And then number 2, who's their 5th man? And again, they don't have time, like you're saying, to do this over the course of weeks.
Yeah.
They've got to cram like a month and a half worth of storyline into 8 days, which they have so far. And then next week is going to be the go home show 1 day before the pay-per-view.
That's why I was like, it's kind of like they just pressed fast forward and they were like, we don't have anybody for Survivor Series. 2 weeks later, it was like, we have everything set. It's just like, let's just hit a couple of these little storyline pieces and get a Survivor Series set up.
Do you like this matchup that they're moving towards for the main event at Survivor Series? Putting aside the fact that it's rushed and putting it together, because I think they've done a decent job of storyline building, even though it is an accelerated timetable. Do you like what they're building to here? Because that's the main event. Tonight's lead is that they're putting all the pieces together for Survivor Series. Do you like what you see now that you've seen all the pieces?
You know what it really boils down to? The Bloodline's awesome. So yeah. I want to see them in a main event against whoever. Okay. Like if one of the teams was like a throwaway team and then they kind of put together this other throwaway team together, which they do that sometimes, and you're like, I'm not too interested in this. But one is so established in the Bloodline, you're like, cool, I'll watch them wrestle anybody. So they take kind of like a mid to bottom card team and then throw some other 2 guys in with them, Drew McIntyre or Kevin Owens, to like a mid card team. And then they're like, okay, it could really be anybody on the other side here. And I think that they've done an okay job. I mean, they've done all they could in 4. They have pretty much have 4 hours of TV to get this over. Yep. So yeah, they did all they could, and just the fact the Bloodliners are awesome. So I'm just like, anybody versus the Bloodline.
Okay, so you like the Bloodline for who they are. Here's another wrinkle. Survivor Series always used to be these large teams that were just mismatches of guys who were, like you were saying, sort of thrown together just for Survivor Series. Does it add to the fact that one of the teams in this main event for Survivor Series is not a team that's thrown together? It's a faction that's a full 5-man faction that is part of WWE lore at this point?
Yeah.
Does it add to it that it's the bloodline wasn't invented 2 weeks ago? The bloodline, I don't know, it predates me getting back into WWE. The bloodline has been around for the better part of a year. Does
Mhm.
it add to War Games that it's a team that was already a team pre-Survivor Series buildup?
Yeah. I mean, it is interesting because you're right. Survivor Series is random people that kind of get thrown together. But
Yep.
when was the last time the WWE even had a 5-person faction? Like,
I
they
couldn't
don't
tell you.
even really exist. Like, hey, you even mentioned it earlier, NWO. That's like the last big faction I can think of that had like
Sure.
over 5 members that all had a T-shirt. You know.
You're right.
But yeah, so I don't know, but yeah,
What
I
do
would
you
have.
think of the team that's opposing the bloodline here? Because the bloodline is a well-oiled machine. They're obviously a group whose storyline predates getting into War Games. But for them to get an opponent, they had to do on the other side a little bit of guys with a long running story and then a little bit of throwing guys together. Did you see the early segment, the opening segment, where Sheamus explains why suddenly Drew McIntyre is in the fold? Did that work for you?
Yeah, I think that opening was pretty good, but again, I mean, I'm just keep repeating it, but it's just because I love the bloodline and they just rule this show. So like any segment with them, I'm like, okay, cool. And Sheamus has done pretty good recently. So you know, the opening promo at least set up the main event, which I always like. And ultimately, um, yeah, I'd have to say I, I'm okay with them all kind of throwing them together. And I think that Owens and McIntyre are big enough that they can kind of carry the mid card team. That would give you some shadow of like, okay, maybe they will knock them off. Although that's not happening. There's no way.
I don't know. I mean, Roman Reigns is part time. Jey Uso may have had a real life injury coming out of Crown Jewel. They still have the Sami Zayn angle. I mean, they could use Survivor Series as a reason to give the Bloodline a break, and then wait till maybe Royal Rumble for the road to WrestleMania. So I don't think it's, maybe I read too much into it because I've watched so much wrestling, but it's not a foregone conclusion to me that it would be implausible to have the Bloodline lose this, especially since I think they put together enough. It's a combination of guys who know each other as a faction. There's just not 5 of them, plus other guys who are main eventers. I mean, Sheamus, Kevin Owens, and Drew McIntyre are main eventers. There are three, A guys in that group, plus the Brawling Brutes, Rich and Butch are, cohesion guys with Sheamus. I love the opening segment when Sheamus answered the screw up, technically what the mic from last week. He said, "Okay,
Yes.
the mic's working this week." Nice callback to last week's closing segment. I like that. I like that as Sheamus hears some Usi chants, he starts saying to Drew that he's going to be an honorary Brute, and not Brute as in the French pronunciation of Brutus the Barber Beefcake. Not that Brute. We're talking Brute as in Use, as in Brutes. The Brute. So he's an honorary Brute, and Drew had some fun with that. They also mentioned that Drew and Sheamus, because of their long rivalry, they have such respect for each other, and that's a good way to kind of close that.
You know,
That's a
I'll
great way to
mention
close that.
something about the opening promo I liked. I can tell they're not so rigidly reading off of a script like they once did. They're kind
Mm-hmm.
of doing a little bit more improv and like hearing the crowd and responding to the crowd and then saying a couple lines.
And
Um,
Sheamus and Drew can do that. They're veterans. They've done this before.
yeah, and a lot of the stuff that had been happening for years, kind of why I stopped watching, but they would go out and they would do like long monologues of like maybe 2 or 3, 4 minutes, and they'd really struggle. Most of the guys would really struggle through it to make it that interesting, because some of the jokes would go flat, and then they would like keep, or some of the points would go flat, and then they would keep going back to that point, and then
Yeah, you're
I
trying
think
to remember rather than be in your character. You and I did indie pro wrestling. Um,
sure.
you were an in-ring talent, and I was the commentator who would sometimes interview people, and I would never get a script for doing an interview. And I don't know if you remember, but I used to tell you guys, it's like, look, I don't have a script. They don't give me a script for this stuff. So the key is, you guys, if you're comfortable in your character, I'll lead you along with filling in the information. I'll do the boring stuff, because you don't want a wrestler to have to, do boring stuff. You want a wrestler to be saved for doing stuff that's going to get heat, either good or bad. And so we never had really a script, but if you know your character, you can just sort of improv play your character. So, I mean, you and I know that's a possibility. And, we were amateurs. I mean, the WWE should be able to trust professionals with doing. I mean, we weren't like total amateurs, like like it was open mic night or something. We've done this for years, on
Mhm.
almost a monthly basis. But still, I mean, we knew how to do it. You can trust Sheamus and Drew McIntyre to do it. You can trust Roman Reigns to do it.
It's funny because like doing that style, where you don't have a script, is, I think, for some people completely terrifying, because they're just like, well, then what do I say?
Yeah.
But it's just like, if you go out there and you just memorize your lines and then you just say them line by line, it's going to come off so fake and cheesy. And not only that, like if you say your line by line, like it's tough for people even in theater can say line by line and be convincing, right?
Mhm.
So you have to be a really good actor. But if you're kind of just have an idea of what you're going to say and then you say it as yourself, that's just kind of turned up to 11, then it's going to be more believable. But
Yes,
anyways,
and on that, if I could, I don't mean to,
now keep
like
going.
interrupt here, but on that note, what we're talking about here is promos that I'm going to say they resemble wrestling matches. You're not out there by yourself. You're out there with someone else, and you're sort of playing off each other. It's kind of like being in a wrestling match. If you trust who you're in the ring with, you can have a great match. And if you trust who you're in the ring with for a promo, you can do that. You can have a great match where you're each kind of leaning on each other, supporting each other. And you're like, last week when Sheamus's mic didn't work and Roman jumped in to make a joke out of it, he wasn't doing that just to put himself over.
Yeah.
He was doing it to save Sheamus, who's got a dead microphone.
Right.
What are you going to do? Just have Sheamus stand there with a microphone not working for 10 seconds?
Yeah.
Roman's jumping in because that's what you would do in a wrestling match. You got to make the guy you're in the ring with look good, or neither one of you looks as good as you could. So
Yeah.
these guys are playing off each other like they would in a wrestling match. You're each playing off the crowd. You're playing off of each other. Some guy does something that makes you laugh or makes you perk up a bit. You go with it. One guy calls a spot, you execute it. The other guy calls his spot, you execute it.
You can
You
even do.
guys are pro wrestlers. Translate that to talking. And maybe that's easier said than done for someone like me, who's, my skill is talking. I can talk. But, I can see some of these guys, the way they interact in promos, it reminds me of how guys who are really good at this interact in a ring. And I'll give you an example of that we saw tonight. Yeah, let me talk to you. Bray
Whoa.
Wyatt and LA Knight were fantastic.
I almost said that was the lead just because I knew it was pretty big. That LA Knight's getting quite the push.
He's getting some kind of push, but wasn't it fantastic the way they interacted with each other. It's like they're each calling their spot in a match. And it's, you and I have talked before because we notice things like this. How when guys get in the ring who typically wrestle different styles, how you can have that difference of styles as long as it's not a mismatch. You
Yeah.
can make it work. Bray Wyatt, what they're doing with the character now and what they're doing with LA Knight, really distinct styles on the mic. But I thought it worked today. They were each so good at not only doing what they do, but of putting over the other guy. That was great promo work from guys who, what was this, the second week they've worked together?
Yeah.
Tell me what you thought of that, because see, you and I are coming at this from totally different perspectives. You know Bray Wyatt, and you're getting introduced to LA Knight. I know Eli Drake / LA Knight, and I'm getting introduced to Bray Wyatt. So you go first and tell me, as someone who's seen Bray Wyatt so many times, especially on the mic, and that was a real skill of his. What was it like to see him playing off of somebody else like LA Knight today? And just what goes through your mind as you're watching them? Like you already said, you thought that was a great story angle and a great segment. But like, go ahead, man. What did you think?
I gotta say, the Bray Wyatt thing, when it first started to happen, I was like, all right, what is this? And even tonight, the super long entrances,
Mm-hmm.
I'm like, all right, what the hell's going on? Like, what is the point of all this? So I like that the fact that they threw in LA Knight, who's just completely the opposite of what
Yeah,
Bray Wyatt is. So I mean,
on the
Bray
mic.
Wyatt is a WWE super, like he's like a WWE supernatural guy that has been around for a while. And LA Knight is doing the cocky jerk indie guy. Well, I say indie because he was in the NWA, but like
Mm-hmm.
he's big in the indies, and then he obviously knows how to talk on the mic, but he's just completely different. So, like you said, that mashup's good. But also, I really like LA Knight does really bizarre things when he talks. Like
Okay.
he goes out, and I could hear the what chant starting, and I was like, oh no, are they gonna do like the what chant?
Yeah.
And he kind of starts to just sort of say his lines, and then he stopped, and then he just stopped talking for like 5 seconds or 6 seconds, and the crowd just starts booing him. I was like,
Mm-hmm.
dude, he's just giving them silence, and they're like, boo, and then like suddenly everybody's booing, and it's just like, oh, like let that start to throw them some curveballs, and then like see how they react, and then they all start booing like crazy. I was like, that was really well done, because a lot of guys will go out and they'll start getting the what chants, and then it's just like, then they say this, what, then they say that, what, and the segment is ruined.
And it's ruined because that what chant is the crowd getting used to too much of an expected rhythm. Guy says phrase here. What? Guy says another phrase like this. What? Guy says this phrase. What? Guy says back this again. What? And like it's the rhythm of it. It's almost too boring that the crowd's trying to spice it up. Like you're right, LA Knight. What a move to take back control from the crowd and not let that get out of hand.
Yeah. So that was great. And then, you know, Brace, I really like the direction of him as a normal guy rather than like,
Trying to be a normal guy.
yeah, that
Trying to be a normal guy. That even I'm picking up on the shtick here.
right.
He's still kind of esoteric. Another big word. We've done physicality and esoteric. He's still kind of esoteric.
Mm-hmm.
Um, he's still kind of out there, a little flighty, you know, getting into some of the, I'm not my real self. It's like, and then there's LA Knight, who's like as real can get.
Yes.
He's just so transparent. He's transparently a jerk, but it's transparent.
Right.
Like
So
he's as real and as fast talking as you can get. And there's Bray. And you mentioned thinking that Bray Wyatt was not that interesting when they started out these segments maybe a month or so ago. I agree with you. And wow, was it so much better to have Bray be able to play off of somebody else? This was Bray Wyatt's most interesting mic work because he had somebody else in there. Like when LA Knight slaps him the first time. Great, I mean, just great setup. LA Knight very cautiously makes his way up to the ring, talking about respect and fear. And like maybe when you looked in my eyes, you didn't see fear. And talking about the respect is in short supply around here in the WWE. It's like, yeah, okay, I like where this is going. LA Knight climbs into the ring, extends his hand. Bray's looking down, reaches like he's going to shake hands, and LA Knight smacks him in the face. And now the ball's in Bray's court. What does he do? And Bray Wyatt just, he turned his character up even another level. It's like, I'm not gonna do what I want to do right now. I'm gonna try and be the better man. And now he's now stalking his way over, and you can see him. LA Knights look like, oh, I wasn't expecting that. I was expecting either he was going to charge at me and we were going to throw down, or I was expecting him to just kind of not know what to do, and I was going to like prance my way out of here as if I won the whole thing. And Bray comes over and starts talking about the next thing you do will determine your future. Mm-hmm. And he extends his hand to shake hands, to say like, okay, we're even. Because that was LA Knight's big thing. Like, you headbutted me in the chin last week, and I just keep seeing that over and over again. Well, now I caught you with a slap. I caught you with a sucker punch. We're even. And Bray's going, yes, we're even. And he sticks his hand out again. And now there's that wonderful tension, that wonderful suspense. LA Knight drops the microphone as if say like talking's over. And he slaps him again. And then hops down off the ring and is just jawing at him without a microphone as he backpedals up the ramp. So arrogant. And Bray, after taking the second slap, he's kneeling in the ring, leaning over that middle rope. And I've mentioned WWE's camera work and direction before. That close-up on Bray Wyatt, not saying a word and just glaring at LA Knight. For a segment with no wrestling and whose only physicality was a couple of sucker slaps. What a great segment.
Yeah.
I want to see where this goes now. To me, it's better for Bray that he's at least interacting with somebody, but fantastic. And that's not the last we saw of him tonight, was it?
No, they had 2 segments. So, well put. You just laid that out perfectly. Yeah, that's
even.
It's the I really don't have much to add from what you said. But
well, did you like it? Like, did it resonate with you? Did it make sense? Were there any aha moments for you? Were you along for the ride when they were trying to build suspense?
Think of it like this: LA Knight feuded with those dancing people, and now he's feuding with Bray Wyatt. And the dancing people, I was like,
here to here. Like, holy mackerel.
Yeah. So
comedy spot with guys who at best are jobbers to the guy they're pushing to the moon.
Yeah. And then also in that second segment, they said your line. He said your line that
So we're really 3 segments. He's hightailing it out of the arena. He gets stopped by one of the journalists in the back. And he does, hey, do you stick around after your work's done? No, neither do I. And he gives the yeah as he runs through the door. We see him one more time. Do you remember it?
No.
It was between the Shayna Baszler Shotzi match and before the 6-man Imperium versus New Day and Braun Strowman. They cut quickly to backstage. LA Knight is laid out beneath some debris and tables. And all you see is him motionless on the ground, and WWE officials trying to, pick junk off of his prone corpse I mean, he's not dead, not really corpse, but he's just motionless there. And so the hint there is that Bray Wyatt caught him backstage, and maybe now they're really even.
Yeah. So I would say I'm pretty interested in this storyline, and it's probably the kind of curveball you needed for Bray Wyatt, because he's just been doing promos with himself, which I was like, okay, this is enough of this. So he's got a formidable competitor in a wrestler, and in opposing style, and in mic skills. So
Yeah, I mean, up to this point, Bray Wyatt's opponent has been the crowd.
right.
Like, you need another program other than you versus the crowd.
Yes.
So yeah, I mean, they could do worse than LA Knight. And LA Knight could do a lot worse than being in a program with Bray Wyatt, even if it only lasts 2 weeks.
So I did notice one thing about this show, that there wasn't a ton of wrestling, and that might be just because, I mean, they had 2 promo segments, and then they also had the main event, which kind of was a storyline pusher, not necessarily like for the match specifically, because there was so much interference.
Mm-hmm.
And then even like, so anyways, I would say the best wrestling match was pretty surprisingly Madcap Moss and Karrion Kross. I thought that was actually
okay.
That just was like kind of old school Hoss match. 2 huge dudes just doing like some basic slams to each other, and I was like, okay, this actually, after weeks of Karrion Kross doing these vignettes and these attacks and these really confusing direction that he's in, he just wrestled Madcap Moss, who's just some other hossy guy, and they just slammed each other around.
This is a rematch. They wrestled 3 weeks ago on SmackDown. And at the time, it was this was the week that you and I did not do, because we were planning that 1 month recap.
Okay.
They wrestled on October 28th. This was right after we did our 1 month recap, and we were unavoidably detained on that Friday, the Friday of Halloween weekend. They wrestled a match that left me kind of confused, because I did get to see it on a replay that Fox was doing. This was going into Crown Jewel, where Karrion Kross was set to face Drew McIntyre in a cage match. And in that match, Karrion Kross beat Madcap Moss with interference from Scarlett. And I'm sitting there going, all right, he just beat Drew McIntyre at Extreme Rules basically the same way.
Right.
This is elevating Madcap Moss, who I don't know who this guy is. Like, they're putting on like he's getting beat the same way that he beat Drew McIntyre. On the other hand, on the flip side of that, it's like, holy mackerel, Karrion Kross is going into a steel cage match in a pay-per-view, and he can't beat a guy I've never seen before without help from his valet? What's going on there? So I was glad to see them do the rematch today, and to build where, they had Emma run out at the end to check on Madcap Moss.
Yeah.
So this was kind of a neat way of, maybe it would have been more interesting to have Emma run down during the match once Scarlett started interfering, and kind of even up the odds there on the outside. Because I'm with you. I think Madcap Moss, he's got the size and he looks really athletic. So it looks like WWE is trying to find a program for him. There's only so much hours of TV. There's only so many storylines. They've got a great roster. I think they're trying to find something, because somebody backstage sees something in him. And okay, so he's lost to Karrion Kross basically twice in 4 shows, and really the same way both times.
Yeah,
he's tapping out to that cross jacket sleeper. Little wrinkle in it this match, but it was a pretty good match. And I think the same problem. There were 5 matches today, but all of them were. They almost buried the matches. Like, all of these matches were kind of subservient to something else going on. Like, this match was in a sense, trying to, in one way, get Cross out of these programs because it looks like maybe they have something else planned for him. He had a confrontation with the Usos backstage later on in the show. And also, they're trying to get something for Madcap, but also pairing him with Emma. And so this was a match where they needed to do that in order to build this. I mean, some other matches like Shayna Baszler versus Shotzi. This match was
About
not
Ronda.
worthy of the second hour. I'm going to put it gently. But it was a way to have Shotzi beat Ronda Rousey's henchwoman before Shotzi gets her chance at Ronda Rousey. It was neat to see Ronda Rousey doing distraction on the outside and getting involved under Raquel Rodriguez coming out. And, can we just end the subtext here? All of the alliteration. It's Ronda Rousey, RR. It's Raquel Rodriguez, RR. It's Karrion Kross, KK. It's Madcap Moss, MM. Oh my goodness. It's just what they do in WWE when they're naming people.
Vince loves alliterations.
Yeah.
Clearly. As we are heading into the pay-per-view Survivor Series.
SummerSlam.
Survivor Series makeup. Yeah, it's funny. It's like the one thing that he retained in English class in high school was alliterations.
Was your poetic license. There you go.
Ran with it. He just that's the only thing that he really picked up on. And he just is that's what it's going to be. Now, I like alliteration, so I'm not going to hate on them, but they are all alliterations.
Just something to notice there about creative. So we've got, was there anything that stood out to you in either of those matches? I mean, a lot of these matches are just almost lightning round commentary for me because the matches themselves, I don't think had a lot of great stuff in them. Was there something from the Madcap Moss Karrion Kross match that really stood out to you as good in-ring work?
The only thing I really liked about it was two kind of guys working slow enough in there that they weren't working so fast. And I think, I like the finish of the choke at the end and just he taps out. Just nobody ever taps out anymore. They always have to be choked out or there's something. But he just, I quit. I'm okay, cool. I like that finish.
Did you like the double finish, really? He's got the cross jacket on him. Madcap Moss fights out of it by standing up, picking up Karrion Kross, who's on his back, applying the hold, and just dropping backwards in a slam. Mm-hmm. But when he does it, Karrion Kross has enough wherewithal, and Madcap Moss isn't energetic enough to just roll out and follow it up. So Karrion Kross just reapplies the thing, and now he's got him because now they're on the mat.
Yes.
Now that they're both on the mat, now that sleeper hold really gets synced in. And that's when Madcap Moss taps. So that was a neat wrinkle to it.
Yeah.
But, I'll give him credit. I like that finish. I like how that match kind of progressed. That was a pretty decent match for me. I'm interested to see more. I mean, neither one of those guys looked like they didn't belong or didn't know what they were doing. And I'd like to see where it goes from them. I mean,
and we just didn't get a lot of wrestling tonight. So
no, the Shayna Baszler Shotzi match was a lot of posturing on the outside. And I'll tell you this, Ronda Rousey, she's got her character down. She's good on the mic. She's good with her character. She seems really comfortable as a heel. I mean, my problems with her is that she doesn't really get pro wrestling. But frankly, neither does Shayna Baszler. These are not good matches with these former MMA people. They don't get pro wrestling. I'm getting flashbacks to Tank Abbott when Vince Russo brought him in to WCW to be his henchman. And Tank Abbott was just, and maybe it was being saddled with Vince Russo, but I mean, Tank Abbott, legitimate badass, just didn't go anywhere in a wrestling context.
Yeah. Now that you mention it, they do put her on at 9:00 a lot, Shayna, and it hasn't been anything to write home about. And it might be her opponents and it might be her. But Shotzi's been okay so far. So, one of the things I kind of noticed about this match too with Ronda Rousey, she's sort of lost with the heel manager thing when she comes out because she does the distractions, which is correct, but
Mhm.
she doesn't sell anything to the crowd. Like she doesn't one of the real basic things is like trying to trash the crowd as the heel
Yeah.
manager. She's like she does the distractions, and then when she's done, she's like, "Come on, Shotzi, come on, Shayna, come on," and she's just like cheering her on, which is like the babyface manager thing. So she's suddenly then like cheering her on, and then but she's
Uh,
not selling anything to the crowd, and then the crowd is just like dead. So you're just like you are the
I'm
being.
gonna take the opposite there. I like that you brought that up, but I'm gonna take the opposite. I think the heel manager just like yelling "shut up" to the crowd is cheap heat.
Yes,
Especially, quite frankly, this crowd was dead
yeah,
for this match.
I know.
So
They
like just concentrate on if you're a good heel, it should be obvious to you without having to say I'm a heel. If
I
you're a
think they
good
never
baby
used
face,
that
it should
tonight.
be obvious without having to tell everyone, come on, I'm a baby face. I'm the hero. You should cheer me. I mean, if somebody did that, they'd be mocked. Like, my goodness. Now that's one. So I like that Ronda has heel heat without going cheap heat. And I
Mm,
just wish that she understood wrestling as well as she understands character development. Like I wish she understood match development as well as she understands character development because she's got the character down, she's got the persona down, and she seems like she's really into it.
yeah.
So like she's almost better as just a manager and a valet and a thug on the outside interfering and making things miserable for Shayna's opponent.
Maybe that could be like, you know, they could find something for her there like that. I mean,
Yeah,
that's not really a terrible idea, but I mean, she is the champ, so
she's got the belt, so she's got to
she's got to
she's got to
drop.
get in the ring and she's got to be better.
Yeah,
So I hope she can because like her work as a character and on the mic at least signals to me maybe why WWE really sees something in her because she gets performing. She's just got to get better at wrestling.
hmm
So I'll leave it there until we see Ronda get in a ring again. I will leave the analysis of Ronda's lack of wrestling skill. But
So,
so
Tom,
there's two other matches here.
hang
Unless you
on a
wanted to
second. I
continue on
wanted
that,
to say
I wanted to
something.
ask you what about these other two matches you may have liked: Ricochet versus Mustafa Ali at the beginning, or Imperium versus New Day and Braun Strowman. Like,
All
where do
right,
you want to go next?
I'm surprised we're so far into this show,
Uh
and we have not mentioned our boy
huh.
Ricochet getting his first win in years, I think. I don't know. How long have we been watching this? He
We've been
has
watching
been
almost 2 months.
losing and losing and losing in all of
Oh,
these good matches. And I saw the card. It was Ricochet versus Mustafa Ali. And I was
yep.
like, this is they watch the show last week when we
I
were
think they
talking?
did.
We were
They're
like,
watching us. WWE is watching Don't Bury the Lead to find out where to go next because you and I brought up how Ricochet keeps getting beat even though he looks good. And sure enough, tonight, Wade Barrett on the mic as Ricochet makes his entrance and is standing up in the ring, starts talking about how Ricochet was the Intercontinental Champion, lost it. I think he said he dropped it to Gunter in June, and then since then it's been rough going for Ricochet trying to get another win. So I think they're watching us, man. We were all over that last week. That Ricochet, he looks great in the ring. How is this guy not getting a win every now and then? And
I
yeah,
knew,
man, I'm going to say this. I'm going to throw this out. Ricochet versus Mustafa Ali. That was my match of the night. I really enjoyed that.
yeah, I'm starting. I realize this now. I forgot. Yes, that's the best wrestling match of the night for sure. Um, Mustafa Ali is good. I know
Yes.
he just is kind of like buried in the undercard. and I don't know if they know what exactly to do with him because he just looks a lot like Seth Rollins. So I always just like I get them mixed up almost. So yeah. So anyways, it was cool to see Ricochet get a win, and he started as like they went from the promo to that match. So it was like, okay, we're starting the show pretty hot. You have Ricochet, who's done pretty good stuff the last couple weeks, and then Mustafa Ali played the role of Ricochet, which is the good. He's not a jobber per se. He's going to lose, but he's going to lose in a
He's
strong
gonna
match.
look. He's gonna lose looking good. And I really liked how Mustafa Ali sold the ribs the whole match. Like that was part. They showed a quick clip of him facing Bobby Lashley. I guess maybe it was the most recent Raw, and Bobby Lashley just pummeling the guy, and that's where he hurt his ribs. And so they played this up that Ricochet and Ali they have a respect for each other. Maybe they're friends backstage. I mean, there was that kind of bonding moment before where they started their match. Then they started their match, and like Ricochet's playing up. Do I really want to do this to a guy I respect and like who's hurt? And then them Ali playing up his ribs being hurt, and then they get to the finish. It's a great false finishes, near falls. I do like the finish. Um, let's see, what was it? Ali misses the 450 splash, and then as he staggers to his feet, Ricochet hits the shooting star crossbody. So both these
Yeah.
guys are high flyers. Their wrestling styles seem to mesh well, but it was the little things other than them just being high flyers that really worked. Like Ricochet playing off the psychology that he really didn't want to hurt his friend. Ali playing off, my ribs are hurt and I'm gonna keep selling that. And I thought that was really just, this match could have been a nothing. It could have been a throwaway, but I hats off to these guys for doing a really good professional job of psychology storytelling in the ring. And yeah, they can go, but it was the extra stuff that made this match special.
I yeah. So I like the finish for sure.
Mm-hmm.
Because it was wild. I don't think I've ever seen
Right?
that. It was like,
Yeah,
yeah, the shooting star press, and he's standing while he hits it, which is like,
into
whoa.
a crossbody. Yeah.
It was like, whoa. So the finish was awesome. And I will have to admit, I did not see what was the other match you mentioned outside of Mustafa Ali and Ricochet.
Imperium versus New Day and Braun Strowman.
I had all kinds of
Imperium interrupted the interview backstage. So
Mhm.
there was a lot of stuff happening earlier in the show that gets revisited later in this show. That was neat. They interrupted New Day and kind of insulted them for being the wrong kind of tag team with all the dancing and all the flamboyance in the ring. Again, very different style from Imperium. And so then Gunther says, after they make fun of Gunther for, being like, is Lurch from the Adams family your relative or something? You know, they're just making fun of Imperium for being, they're giving each other
The
as good as
lurch
they get.
line. Yeah.
The Lurch line, they're so New Day's making fun of Imperium for being, too stiff, and Imperium's making fun of New Day for, being too flamboyant and dancing around and making a joke out of tag team wrestling. So, all right, square off in the ring. New Day has to find a third man, though. It's Braun Strowman. And again, like this match looked like it was subjugated to the fact that Braun Strowman is in the World Cup tournament to see who's going to be the number one contender to Gunther's IC title. And so they're playing this up the whole match that like Gunther is really cautious about approaching Braun Strowman. It's like they've already given that tournament to Braun Strowman because they're already putting him in these confrontations with Gunther. And like Gunther's running away from him. And, Braun Strowman is just shoulder tackling everybody in Imperium. It's runaway, and of course, New Day and Braun Strowman get the win with New Day hits the midnight hour double team that you really liked from last week, and I liked it too. They hit
Yeah.
it on Kaiser for the pinfall. And honestly, that's the only note I wrote down for the match because it was the only thing that happened from a wrestling standpoint that I thought was interesting. Like it was all a match being used just to further storyline and to put it in your heads that maybe Gunther is intimidated by Braun Strowman. And now what's going to happen the rest of this World Cup tournament? And, are they teasing it? Are they setting something up? I don't know. I mean, to me, it's good storytelling, but it's another example of them kind of making a match take a back seat to some extracurricular angle they're running. This is why we don't really have a lot to say about the matches tonight, because the matches were jobbers. The matches were putting over the angles rather than the other way, rather than angles leading to great matches. This was matches jobbing to the furthering of angles down the road, man.
I
I mean,
like
they
that.
weren't squash jobs, but the
Matches,
matches weren't great.
yeah, the matches were doing the job tonight, and the angles are way over.
Mhm.
Yeah, the angles are pretty good, and the wrestling wasn't so hot, but it they are doing some pretty good stuff creatively where these angles are actually, and this is pretty new to me, like that they actually would create pretty good angles, but
Okay.
I'm pretty captivated. I would say, like, you know, I would probably watch Survivor Series, you know, and
Me too. We've got
the
another
element,
show to go
the
before
most
they get. We've got a go home show next Friday. But
you
yeah,
got the guys I think really highly of, and then I would say my takeaway, would be Bray Wyatt and LA Knight is interesting. I'm I'm like, okay, this is going somewhere now that we're kind of having the pieces fall together. And I don't know if it was meant to be like this or they were like, okay, we got LA Knight, he's pretty good. We got Bray Wyatt doing something really weird with him talking to himself. Like, let's put them together, but it's working.
it's working, and I would love to see these guys wind up on the same team, almost like an odd couple thing. I think that works sometimes. I'll give you a
Yes,
quick TNA example if you want from Impact Wrestling.
let's
They
do
put
it.
together Robert Roode and James Storm. And, Robert Roode was this, excellent technical wrestler, the Canadian lineage. And James Storm was just like a drunk who brought beer bottles to the ring.
Was
And
he
they gave him beer money, yes.
Yeah,
And they
okay.
gave them this odd couple shtick, but oh my goodness, did it work? It was fantastic. Beer money. It was great. And so odd couple tag teams, it can work if your talent is good enough. And so I'm open to seeing Bray Wyatt and LA Knight maybe bury the hatchet and start running some weird alliance together.
I
I'm
know. I think
game. I'll see where it goes.
it it could either be a match between the two of them, or it could be them teaming, which might be more interesting. But I don't know. We'll have to see. So Dom, we're kind of heading toward the end of the show here. Anything that you wanted to add that you saw that you'd want to bring to the show tonight?
I like. I know they're teasing it, but Gunther in the ring with Braun Strowman. I was surprised at how. I mean, Gunther's tall, but he looks like he can hold his own in there with Braun. So Braun Strowman's built as a monster, and just like a little thing to notice is that Braun Strowman and Gunther in there. That looks like a pairing that could work. So if they are building to that, I'm intrigued. Since this was a show where all the matches basically job to the angles, that's my little go home nugget is just that visual. I like it. I like if they're going to go Gunther Braun Strowman. I I like that.
Perfect. Well, Dom, I'll tell you what.
What's
Uh,
yours? Like go home. Come on, hit me with your move, man. Hit me with the finishing move.
my go home is I am, for the first time in a very long time, excited for or interested in the Survivor Series. I couldn't tell you who a Survivor Series match that I've seen in a decade that I was like, yeah, I really want to see this.
Those
So this
team
one,
matches that are faction on faction.
it's usually
Those ones.
just one time they did like SmackDown versus Raw. I'm like, why would I care about that? And like, there's all these different variations they tried. They had like Undertaker in one, like I think 2 years ago, and I'm like, the super old guy, okay, like I don't necessarily care, but this one, because I'm such a mark for the Bloodline, I'm such a fan of the Bloodline. I see them in the Survivor Series. I'm like, cool, I'll watch that. So my go home is I'm actually interested in Survivor Series.
There you go. 1, 2, 3. That's the pinfall. I'm with you on that one. I like it.
2, 3. All right. Well, thank you so much for joining me, Dom. Thanks for anybody that was listening here. We'll be here every Friday night. We'll be recapping SmackDown, and we'll be sending little segments of the show. I think that's basically what it's turning into. It's just like little segments of our show and our conversation throughout the course of the week. So, yeah, we'll be here every Friday night. Thank you very much. This is Don't Bury the Lead. Have a great evening.